All right, I'd like to welcome you to our St. Cloud Council Workshop this Thursday, April the 18th, 2019. And with that, I'll call this meeting to order. And could we begin with our roll call?
Mayor Blackwell?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Matheny?
Here.
Councilmember Cooper?
Here.
Councilmember Askew?
Here.
Councilmember Trace?
Here.
Mr. Sturgeon has asked to make a presentation first, so we'll recognize our city manager.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. Several weeks ago, we met with a company, a public television company called Information Matrix, and they do short-form documentary series on cities around the United States. And I want to show you a short video before I continue my discussion. Jay?
Okay?
Welcome. I'm Lawrence Fishburne. Every day, new ideas pave the way for a better tomorrow. In this story, we are highlighting some of the most interesting and innovative developments impacting the world around us. Here's one such example.
Never before has our world been so accessible. We can get to and from anywhere at any time, and it's all because of these. In fact, every year, international airports connect millions of global travelers to local communities across our country, and by doing so, they are helping communities thrive. Seen as gateways to America's cities, airports help to underpin the economy and deliver overall public value.
All great cities have great transportation systems, and an international airport really is the foundation of the modern city's transportation system. Millions of people from the United States, almost 1 billion last year, traveled around the United States and around the world, leaving from international airports and leaving from national airports. If you think about it in big, broad terms, everything we use and everything we buy to a great extent is brought through a transportation system. Our lives wouldn't be the same without these great transportation hubs. And it really creates that connectivity that a modern city needs.
An example of this is Indianapolis, Indiana. Not only is it the state's capital, the city is one of the top convention destinations for businesses and is also home to the legendary Indianapolis Motor Speedway, arguably the most popular racing venue in the country. So it comes as no surprise to find out that 8.7 million passengers flew in and out of Indianapolis International Airport in 2017, a statistic that demonstrates the desire to come here for work and play.
When you're competing to host world-class events like the Super Bowl or an NCAA Men's Final Four, an NBA All-Star Weekend, a College Football Playoff National Championship, where you're trying to get a convention with 60 or 70,000 people, you've got to get people to your city. That's your ultimate objective. And you can only be so good of a city if you have a regional drive-in audience. But if you've got an airport with strong airlift from all over the country and globally, that's what the bottom line is. You got to get people into your city, and having a great airport does that for you.
All these airlines have such a great makeup, and they can see that their business as an airline is taking off right here in Indianapolis because of the great diversity we have. Not only diversity of people, but certainly diversity of our businesses. Being connected, being in a global economy, and having direct flights internationally are key to our success.
We hope this program has served as an inspiration to you. Be sure to join us next time as we continue to profile the thought leaders impacting business. I'm Lawrence Fishburne.
So I've been talking to this production company, and they would like to highlight the city of St. Cloud in a 3 to 5 minute educational video DVD that is going to be shown at over 60 million households across the United States on public broadcasting. And the reason I bring this to this council, it's a high-profile decision. It does cost money. It's $27,000, which I have in my professional services account, and don't have any money encumbered for that funds. But I wanted the council to think about, giving me consensus and buy-in. We've also drafted a resolution for the next meeting for this production, and I think it would be very beneficial to market the city nationally. Additionally, the production film and all that will become the property of the city of St. Cloud for future marketing material.
Would anyone on the council have any questions? Councilman Trace?
So we just saw Indianapolis. Do we know what kind of ROI that Indianapolis got out of
I will
videos?
try to find that out between now and the council meeting on the 25th. Great question.
Okay. And the purpose is economic development?
Yes, sir. Economic development.
Would we want that to come out of the Economic Development Trust Fund, or if the
We
purpose?
could. That's another opportunity we could do. From a budget perspective, I have it in my account. So
Okay. All right.
all right, but we'll look at that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilman Cooper?
Thank you.
You can pull your mic up close.
All right, do you got an idea of what direction you're going to go on this 5-minute?
Well, that would be up to the production company. One of the things we talked about is the mayor would do a small clip, and then we'd find a prominent person in the community that's well-known that would speak to people about our community, and we'll highlight the different benefits we have in our community. That's what the whole idea is. And it seems like a pricey proposition, but I mean, for 60 million views, that's pretty good. Plus, it goes out on the internet, and then we own the production rights.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Matheny?
Thank you. So I guess along the lines of what Mr. Cooper is saying is, is the intent of this to be economic development, like bringing businesses, or is the intent tourism? Because I guess that's the conversation we want to have. Do we want to be a tourism destination, or, I don't know that that's the direction that St. Cloud wants to go, but that could be a conversation. Or is it more like, come open a business here and move your company here?
I think we have to fill out a questionnaire, and we could definitely make sure the production company understands that, we could have two goals. We want people to, it's a great place to start a business, and we also want to encourage people to come and visit our city as a tourist. So we could probably address both of those in the questionnaire.
Councilman Askew?
Yeah, I would assume that would be like we did the economic summit, and we basically were trying to sell our St. Cloud, sell the properties that are here, sell our amenities, our water, our sewer and stuff. It'd probably be something, I would assume something like that. And I'm sure David Rodriguez would be a part of that as well.
Absolutely.
Well, I certainly think it'd be wise to bring us back a proposal and to give us a little more time to give some thought. And I'm not hearing any objections to bringing back a proposal and giving that some thought of, how we would market it and so on. I'd like to see that done. Do we have a consensus for that?
Sure.
Sure.
Sure, okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. This time, it brings us to our first item, discussion regarding the Transportation Master Plan.
Good evening, Christopher Mills, I'm Principal Planner with the Planning and Zoning Department. This first item is the Transportation Master Plan. This project is partially funded by a technical assistance grant from the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. And the research data collection from this project will also inform the update to the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. So on both this master plan and the comprehensive plan update, we are and will be working with the Corradino Group as consultants out of South Florida. Now, this master plan has had a very compressed timeline, but the consultant has been working very hard, and I found out just today that DEO has accepted and signed off on our first two deliverables. The first one is the public engagement report, and then the needs assessment report. Both of those I've given you tonight, updated copies. So I'd like to just go ahead and introduce Scarlett Hammonds from the Corradino Group. She'll go over the project to date and go over the timelines, and then give you an opportunity to provide your input. So Scarlett
Thank you.
Hammonds.
Could you pull that microphone over a little bit? I can hear you well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening. Tonight I'm here to discuss, introduced, the Transportation and Mobility Master Plan for St. Cloud. We're going to be talking about the process, the actual master plan, the process and timeline. The needs assessment will be a good deal of the presentation, which is the phase that we're just completed right now, and go into Q&A after. Transportation Mobility Master Plan is about planning for the future of St. Cloud. It's basically to ensure people, goods, and services keep moving. Planning for the future and addressing current and the future needs. And we went into some modeling to look at the future transportation needs as well. And mostly the goal here is to continue to maintain a high quality of life for the city. As you can see in this graphic, almost 20,000 of your residents leave the city to work in other places other than the city. And only close to less than 2,000 actually live and work in the city currently. Basically what this is resulting in, and I'm sure it's no surprise to people, is very large amount of traffic that's very directional and regional as well. So before today, we went through the process of public engagement. We met with steering committee members, and we had a public workshop, gathered comments, and produced a stakeholder and public engagement document that you have before you today. Now we're in completing the needs assessment phase. This phase of the project, we gathered data and analyzed it and basically identified the gaps in the system. The next steps we'll go into are to address these gaps, or what we call the needs, with the appropriate projects to address it, and that will include cost estimates and prioritization so that we can wrap that into the implementation plan and make it a real plan for your city. You'll be seeing that come to you shortly in about a month and for adoption by your council. And when we look at the overall transportation system, we broke it down into different ways to get from A to B. What do we mean by that? Well, we looked, specifically at users, the elderly, children, bicyclists, and transit-dependent users. And we looked at this in a way that we addressed in 4 ways, and what we call mobility, connectivity, safety, and technology. And I'll go over that now. Looking at mobility, in this slide, you'll see that we modeled into 20 years of the future for the roadway system. And as you'll see, there's a lot of red on this map. And what red means is that these roadways are failing. You're stuck in congestion. And there's a lot of red on this map. What we're going to do is look at ways that we can look at alternatives, options that, site-specific, where you can expand or widen roadways, where you can really create new connections to make more ways for people to get around. And also, we're going to look in all aspects of multimodal approach. As you'll see, I'll be talking about the pedestrian environment, the bicycle routes and ways people can get around on bikes, and transit options in addition to cars. Basically, what we want to do is address how you get to your jobs, what your lifestyle needs are, and to schools. Starting off with connectivity, we looked at connectivity for pedestrians, bicyclists, transit, and auto uses. Basically, we found that there are significant gaps in the sidewalks. And this could be considered an equity issue because you really should have sidewalks at least on one side of every road for people that need that and can't walk on swales or grassy or uneven surfaces, or also for the handicapped in wheelchairs or pushing strollers. And also we found that sometimes crosswalks are just not existent or just end in bad places and dead ends. Again, when we looked at bicycle facilities, we found gaps in the bicycle network. We looked at the safety concerns around your city, sometimes real, sometimes just perceived, but it's important that safety is addressed for all users, all bicycle users at different levels. We also provide some analysis on how you could bring a bike share option to your city, and opportunities when we look at new roadway connections to include bicycle facilities as well, what we term as a complete street, where you're addressing facilities for everybody, including bikes. Also, we noted that some of the facilities have high levels of freight traffic, and that can create a certain situation where you don't want bikes to be anywhere near where those high volumes of freight are going, such as on Old Canoe Creek Road, New Nolte Road, and Hickory Tree Road. Those are identified. Okay. When looking at connectivity for the transit system, basically that was pretty easy because your transit is mostly non-existent other than around US 192. So we noted that there are no routes to Lake Nona for shopping and other entertainment needs, and your residents told us in the public engagement sessions that there needs to be more timely connections, especially to Kissimmee and also to Sunrail, especially for events that they'd like to get to, Orlando for entertainment and events. So the city will continue to work with Lynx to address some route revisions in the future, moving forward. When we looked at the auto and roadway connectivity, okay, there we go. Sorry, okay. This map shows that the connected grid for future network expansion. Granted, not all of these roads are proposed. This is just to show you what a grid system could look like in the city. This is basically focused in the areas where future growth is bound to happen. Also, we looked at considerations for lighting and signalization revisions that would address auto safety. In this slide, you see a traditional grid. I believe this is the north area of your city versus a south area where you have a mostly cul-de-sac situation. And cul-de-sacs are good. They're great for insulating single-family from that pass-through traffic that is sometimes dangerous when you have small children, but it also is really creating the bottlenecks because of this basic lack of connectivity. So moving forward, it would be a policy suggestion that the city move away from this lack of connectivity in these areas, in the future areas. Also, we heard from residents that parking is lacking in certain areas, especially the lakefront and downtown, and for special events. To address safety, we started out by modeling crash data. We looked at the last 5 years, and in this, we looked at pedestrian, bicycle, and auto crash data. And you'll find pretty much a repeat for where the crashes are happening. US 192 is a high concentration for all levels of crashes. In this slide, I want to point out that what we found, and it's not listed on the slide, but in our report, that there are almost, on average, one pedestrian crash per month in the past 5 years, which is pretty alarming. That is very, very high. And we recommend that we look at the intersections to improve safety in these areas, especially where we have the highest. Columbia Avenue is noted as a very high concentration, especially. The bicycles safety, again, the crash data shows that US 192 is specific high concentration. I just have to note on a personal level, this is my third visit to your city, and I have already witnessed a bicycle incident on 192 myself. So that shows you that it's very prevalent. The crashes are almost as high as the pedestrian crashes, and they're also intersection specific, specifically noting Neptune Road and Old Canoe Creek Road. Again, what our report would recommend is improvements to the intersections to address safety for bicycles as well. The auto crashes, again, I'm repeating myself, but they're concentrated also on US 192. What we noted was that these crashes, the way that they're happening, they indicate that there is possibly a spacing issue between the intersections with left turns, and this is causing a safety issue here. And we would recommend that the safety crash data do an analysis and look specifically at the California Avenue, Massachusetts Avenue, and Virginia Avenue intersections. We also wanted to note that we saw areas with poor pavement conditions that would affect safety. To wrap up our report, we suggested that there are some new ways to look at things, new solutions out there, and we kind of came up with a little bit of a toolbox, not suggesting that all of these are right for St. Cloud, but just to make you aware of them. They include things like adaptive signal technology, a transit app to let you know when the bus is coming, audible pedestrian signals that make it better, very high-tech crosswalk kind of thing, bike share, scooter share programs that the city could partner with providers and provide those other options for people to get around. Connected vehicle technology could be implemented as you build new streets. That could be part of what you want to implement. And also autonomous vehicles. We know they're coming, and cities are starting to plan for them now. That basically wraps up my presentation. If you have questions or comments, I'm open.
Mr. Sturgeon?
Yes. Yes, ma'am. You talked about intersection safety. Your recommendations, is that based on signalization or sight distance or other combination of those? Is that what you're?
Yes, that would be all of the type of things that we would look at. That's going to be much more defined when we get into our projects. So we'll be looking at exact projects that we'll be recommending, and I called out some of the main intersections, but it will, if we see issues in other intersections that we didn't mention in this presentation, it would definitely cover that as well. And yes, it would be improvements, all the things you mentioned, signalization, sidewalks, crosswalks, some of the technology that I pointed out, the flashing sidewalks, and auto indicators for pedestrians as well.
And if I could, Mayor, also Council, we've met with 2 different technology companies that have technology to help us move our traffic. I met with Verizon and Ruckus so far. And so we are looking at those options. I think it's cheaper to do technology than pavement, but we're looking at those.
Any questions from the council? Comment? Councilmember Matheny?
Thank you. So, the majority of the intersections and issues that you pointed out are on US 192, which isn't a city road. So is there a plan to go approach DOT about fixing these intersections? Because this isn't a city road.
Right. No, a lot of cities, that's a good question. It would be a partnership, absolutely. You would go through your MPO and in partnership with DOT. There's a process. They open their long-range transportation plan and their transportation improvement plan, their 5-year plan, every year for you to submit projects. And so even though it's not your road, you can still say this is a project that's very important to our city, and describe it and give them the information. Then they would look into it and put it into their plan and budget for it in the future. So that's how that's addressed.
Right, but what's the timing on that? I mean, if you are just putting a project on the MPO right now, I mean, you're 5+ years.
It definitely,
you're down,
it definitely
you're down at the
varies.
bottom.
I've seen all kinds of, they amend it all the time where they push projects forward as, say, like you are seeking a grant to help fund your portion of it, maybe through the Federal Highway Administration, and you are able to secure that grant, or from any agency. I just pulled one, but then your timing of your grant, if you go to FDOT or the MPO and say, hey, we need to have your support and we need to get this pushed forward on your transportation plan, that happens. They do amendments and they move things forward if needed. So the important thing is you get onto the plan and then you work to get other financing and figure out ways to fund it, and then you can move it forward.
Yeah, I just think that's kind of an important consideration to keep in mind. It's
all money.
It's not a fast process, and you're competing against one bucket of funds with all the communities. I mean, the mayor sits on those meetings, he knows.
Well, that's one of the great things about this needs assessment, is that what we're doing is we're getting raw, hard data and giving that to the MPO and saying, these are our needs, these are the issues that we're facing, this is real, because we've got pedestrians getting hit every month on this street, and that's a problem.
Councilmember Trace.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo those concerns, and the sooner we know this is an issue, but the sooner we get the data out there and in front of the MPOs, the sooner we can get some solutions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of adding connectivity and aspects to our code to ensure that connectivity is there, so we don't just one way in, one way out, and keep on adding lanes to it. And then I just want to make sure that when we're going through this and we're going through the future land use element, we're marrying these elements together to make sure that infrastructure and our future land use planning is tying together.
Yeah, and as Chris mentioned, the right immediately following this report will be the update to your transportation element, and we're working on that as well. So we're both doing. We're the same company that's doing both of them, so we'll know. We're basically getting all the background in order to do the policies for your element. So it'll be, this is the background data that we're using for the policies that we're going to update.
Perfect.
So it'll be.
And
together.
will you put together costing for some of the implementation of some
Absolutely,
of the
that's what's
improvements?
coming next. The next phase is the costing and prioritization. We'll recommend not only, I talked a lot about infrastructure improvements to intersections and such, but we're going to recommend free things that you can implement, such as policies or just getting information out there. When we found an interesting thing when we did our public workshop is that one lady said she wasn't able to figure out how to use public transit she's disabled and she couldn't get around very well, but she wanted to use public transit. Another person in the audience said, "Hey, there's this app you can use, and here I'll show you how to do it." And they immediately got together and they figured out it was just education. She just needed to know how to do it.
Yeah.
And so she uses the app and she can get around. And so we'll definitely be recommending policies and new ways that we can get information out to people that stuff already exists.
Yeah, Lynx has a bunch of great programs for individuals that have mobility needs. And
right.
And then, once we get all our elements updated, then we can update fee schedules and impact fees to make sure that we are planning appropriately and saving the money up to where we can make some of these improvements. That's great. Thank you.
Councilmember Matheny.
Thank you. So, Mr. Trace just brought up a good point, too. I know one of the things we've struggled with a little bit is the connectivity between developments in the city. And so I love that we're changing the language to try to help have the connectivity. The other thing that we see people turn in developments and they do what I call the spite strip. So they will stub a road out to almost the property line, and then they'll put a tract in between it, so then you can't ever really, there's that whole NIMBY, right? No one wants the traffic to go through there. But when I was reading this report, I was thinking, all the stuff you talked about with the grid was why I was wanting us to purchase that right-of-way for 17th Street, was to complete the grid. It's exactly that. Like, if you're in the grid, you have 100 ways you can get out. But when we dump all the cars out at one place, you know how it goes. Like, you pass a development and you're just like, oh, I'm never going to get out because you end up having to put a light and, everything. So
Absolutely, right.
I'm glad we're moving forward with all this stuff. So.
And I certainly agree on it. I don't think there's too many surprises in the report. We certainly know that the sidewalks and the parking is pedestrian walkways and bicycle pathways are certainly a huge issue. Wish that years ago more forethought had been given to that, but we're certainly trying to do a lot of catch-up. And would appreciate if you'd show us how we can get all the money to get that done, too, so that would really help.
I'm sure we'll have some suggestions in the report, too.
Any other questions? Thank you, Scarlett.
Thank you all. You've
did
been
an
a really
excellent
good
job.
audience. Thank you very much.
We look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. You have anything else?
No.
Christopher, you have anything else?
No, sir.
All right, thank you.
No, sir.
Find us the bucket of money.
Yeah, find us some money, all right. At this time, I'd like to deal with item number 6 report regarding the power plant, and we'd like to welcome Chip Miriam here with OUC. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Mayor and council members, thank you very much for the privilege of your time this evening. They did it much quicker than I thought they did. That's perfect. I was going to kind of give you a little bit of a background of how we got to where we are today, just to get started in the discussion. There's been, under the petroleum tanks cleanup program, some of the functions of that was delegated from DEP down to local governments. In some cases, a county health department may run it. Other cases, their environmental department may run it. For the last many years, Polk County was actually overseeing that cleanup program here in Osceola County. A few years ago, Polk County got out of that business and shifted it to Orange County. So now the Orange County Environmental Department is overseeing the program, especially the one on this particular site. About that same time, they contacted both OUC as well as the city and said that you've got some outstanding discharge reports here. When you spill oil, you file a discharge report. There's also been some requests for funds under the petroleum contamination cleanup program, where the state actually provides some assistance in money for that cleanup. And they were saying, we need to clean up the paperwork, basically, not just the contamination and the spill. Can you get together with the city and figure out a way to do that? We started pulling in all the various reports because there's been a number of things that have occurred since the start of this. And in part, it's not uncommon in a power plant setting because the nature of oversight wasn't as critical as it is on many other things. And I speak to that from a little experience. I spent 20 years at South Florida Water Management District, and we probably in our own right didn't pay as much attention to the power plants as we should have in this period of time. However, in this case, some projects were started, partially cleaned up. Some projects were started and studied and not cleaned up. And changes occurred, and in most cases, more and more monitoring wells were put in place, trying to figure out where exactly the pockets of contamination were and what's the right way to clean this up. So in last September, August timeframe, we met with the city, started meeting with the city staff and having conversations along the lines of Orange County is getting a little heat from DEP. They have this open request for funds that hasn't been finished. Typically, these types of expenditures on the state's part are done in much bigger, more critically impacted areas. They were criticized, DEP was, by some auditors that they were not moving fast enough, and why we have a lot of these smaller ones out here, get these done, consolidate them, do whatever you need to get them done. So with that as kind of the opening, we sat down with the city and said, we are going to open up another study, but not to study necessarily for the study's sake, but more, let's see if we can't get all these different reports that have been filed over the years together and get an understanding of what's there. And in part, what we did is we looked at some pieces you already know, and I'm going to try not overstate the obvious in some of this, but it's an older site, originally constructed in the 20s, and where the City of St. Cloud staff was interested in OUC was that we had a power plant that's in the same vintage, 1924, and further, we had actually had to go through our own petroleum cleanup. In part, there is some significant differences in how the land surrounds the two buildings, I should say now. Neither one's a power plant at this point in time. And we were dealing with a number 6 type of fuel, which is a much heavier, more crude type oil than the number 2 that the City of St. Cloud had in their fuel source in the City of St. Cloud. We actually brought to the city the 2 methodologies we used. And in this presentation, I'm going to demonstrate both of them. And I have some really high-tech pieces of show and tell of what it looks like when you use them too. And you'll understand the high-tech when you see it come out. But we actually looked at some of these, documented them, and went through and said, all right, now we think we have a fairly good grasp of where the pools or pockets are. But talking to the city staff, they didn't want to go much further than this at this point before they got in front of the city council to start the discussion on how do we move forward, and, together. Do we move forward as partners? Does the city, want to take some of this on themselves? Do they want to use our experience to grow? How do we deal with the facilities on the site? Because in part, the facilities sit on top of several of the structures doing several of the plumes, and I'll show you. We actually pulled out of some of the reports some representative footprints of contamination. There still is in this particular location free product that's sitting in the ground. As you look to the northwest corner, you'll see a more linear free product spill. When we actually, OUC came in and did some transmission line upgrades and upgraded the substation, a lot of that product was actually removed and excavated out. What we could not remove was what went underneath Missouri. So there's still some free product, we believe, and to what exact extent we can't really tell because it just doesn't move that much. And it does move, but it's not moving that much. So there's some unknowns in this. Additionally, under the metal building, there was some monitoring wells that actually showed some brown-colored product, which turned out to be diesel, older diesel. And in the northeast corner of the project site, there was an underground 3,000-gallon storage tank that ended up with about a 3-inch corrosion spot in it that leaked the fuel out. The tank was removed. Some of the soil was removed at the time. And then some of the lines were left in situ, and they were evacuated, but it appears that they may have actually been leaking underneath themselves. So there was some other distribution of fuel oil. And I'm saying a lot of this, having read the reports and meeting with our consultants and your consultants. We share some of the same consulting groups. We haven't excavated to look exactly what's there, how deep, how much, and so forth. And the difficulty in these is the devil in this is in when you start to actually get into the product, dig it up to find out how dispersed it is, and have you really mapped it out as well as you could have. We've also found in a couple other cases some other VOCs, volatile organic compounds, which were from gasoline byproducts, as well as some lube oil, which was conveyed again from an area near where the SCADA building is. The generation facility picked lube oil up as well as fuel into the building. As we clean that up, on the southeast corner, OUC replaced those above-ground storage tanks with an above-ground storage tank to operate with in the vicinity of the southwest corner of the site, not where there's any spill indicated there. That one was actually utilized in the meantime as we were operating the plant. However, in 1998, there was a transfer switch that moved the fuel from the storage tank into a day tank to operate the power plant, and the automatic transfer switch locked up and spilled several many gallons. The exact amount I don't know, but it spilled it into the building itself. So we actually did, at that time, excavate a significant amount of it. But now we're starting to get into a point where the spills are kind of combining themselves. To be able to actually delineate, define, and decide where each one is now becoming one piece of contamination down there. Further looking at other aromatic hydrocarbons, this was just photographs to kind of show you what is there, not anything really definitive. The good news is that it's not hugely deep. It's within the 35-foot parameters of being able to get in there and excavate it out. In many cases, we see where some of the lines are, it's probably 2 and 3 feet below ground surface. So those are moderately easy to get at. Those that are underneath the buildings or under the structures themselves gets very difficult. In some cases, the actual forms and the foundations of the buildings alter the way the migration would occur. And we cannot get a good grasp on that until we either get in, under, or remove facilities in order to excavate cleanly out of there. And a part of the workshop discussion, it comes out that I'm not making a recommendation of anything today, I'm just bringing to you what we had done. In our case, and this was similar in the option A, we actually looked at a way inside the building to break out the floor. It was very expensive. It was, and one of the odd things in the particular building we have in downtown Orlando was they mixed the concrete with crushed granite as well as river rock. So the aggregate wasn't your more typical septic. And it had actually, from what we could tell, gone from maybe a 3,000 PSI original construction or less than that because of the 1924 standards. The gentleman in the crew that was busting out that piece of slab said it was closer to 9,000 PSI at that point. And all the skid loaders we kept bringing in there were breaking, not belts coming off or hoses. The actual equipment was breaking, going through trying to break this stuff out. That building has another issue, which is from virtually the back of the building and then beyond that is now owned by the Central Florida Railroad Corridor, or CSX. CSX is not very eager to allow anybody to work near or around their tracks, and in fact, when you are going to excavate near their requirements can be rather onerous. And in this case, they decided that at a minimum, we were going to put in 3/4 inch sheet pile, drive it in, cut it off, leave it, and then tie it back under the tracks. Well, we sat with our engineer scratching our heads trying to figure out how that works without excavating both sides of the system to do that. And further, on the side between the railroad tracks and the building, there was a natural gas line, there was fiber optics, there was a water line, there were sewer lines, and there was a couple telecommunications lines, as well as a couple 100-megawatt transmission lines sitting in there also. So those options drove us to be creative. Option one is kind of, or option A is kind of looking at the site and saying to the city, what would you like to do with this? Would you like to turn this into a greenfield site for further development or economic development in the future? Do you have other plans you want to look at this site, and is the cleanest it can be the best? And option A are the conditions in order to get you there. It's a shorter time frame. It's the cleanest because you actually are removing the product from the site, and you're either going to airstrip, filter it, and landfill, or transport those to an appropriate type of landfill. And then you backfill it, compress it, meet all your normal requirements for doing that type of civil work, and then you call it good, and then you got the keys to the property to move forward. Option B, and this is where the show and tell comes in. Again, we were a little troubled with how we were going to get there. And there were a couple consultant firms that have used an acrylopolyamide. It's a chemistry that is actually mixed, and the company we actually used was called Badger. They have a series of rods, and they actually determine a matrix of how to put this in. And if I can describe the ends of these rods, they look a lot like sprinkler heads. There's one that does 180 degrees, one that does 45, one that does 90 degrees, and then a bunch that are 360. And you actually put all these down in place and create, for lack of a better term, a rubberized kitty litter underneath the ground level. You seize everything in situ. It's interesting to watch. It's got a neat product. The downside is you now have a closure with conditions with the department. You also have to monitor it a lot longer afterwards in order to meet the Department of Environmental Protection's water quality requirements. And then you deed restrict the property. So again, it limits, what your options are. And if I could, Councilman Trace, I'll share with you first, and you can pass these around. And again, I said these are really extravagant laboratory experiments we ran. It just so happened we found 2 jars on site, cleaned them out real quick. We pulled a core out after we had injected it just to see what it looked like. All these you can open and smell and touch. It's rubbery. This one, we actually put some number 6 in it and then put some of the chemistry in it just to say, it's one of the things that you can tell where a spill is just purely by the odor. And again, you'll notice this does not have an odor. So I said, feel free to open them, smell them, touch them, whatever you like. There's nothing that's going to contaminate or hurt you in that. It's all relatively clean. It is a product that is actually used, where we discovered it through the consultants was as they were closing down several airfields, commercial Air Force bases, and they had aviation fuel that had spilled on the ground from filling, oil tanks leaking, valves leaking, and so forth. They had used this. Again, it's all deed restricted. There's very limited things you can do with it. But in some cases, you can put more dirt, overfill it, and then use it for ball fields and other things. You can't drive rods into it. You can't put wells into it. There's a whole lot of what you can't do more than what you can do. So with that as a bracket, between the city manager and discussions we had with the mayors and others and our quarterly meetings between OUC and the city of St. Cloud, we thought it was time to bring the discussion to the city council so that you could actually understand where we are. I had a phone call with the DEP representative yesterday. He is still urging us to react quickly. And there may be other options we're missing. And frankly, since you have 2 engineers on the council, they may have things that are more notable than what I presented to you today. But at this point, we kind of need direction on what kind of land use would you like for that piece of property at the end of the day, because that will actually direct the cleanup. And are we in a position where we should start looking at a way to get this done at this particular point in time? It is your land, it is your building, and your buildings there. So at this point, I'm open for questions unless the city manager has some more points he'd like to add of things I may have missed.
On option A, what is the time frame typically that it would be to start this, to complete it? I'm looking here.
It's about 2 years on option A and 5+ years on option B. And again, the difference is And the two is how much access do you really have on the site? So the timelines are not in stone by any means. Again, if we're trying to work around the facilities and you don't have a site that is facility-free to go in there and dig, it alters your construction time. And once we start to dig, what we actually find will dictate the actual risk of time as well as cost in this.
Is this continuing to spread?
It will continue to move.
Okay.
The rate at which, I don't have that detection for you, but groundwater in Florida has a tendency to not be stagnant.
Okay, I noticed that we have contamination there on both sides of Missouri at both of those facilities, and we don't know whether or not it has moved under that road or not, but I would imagine
It has.
Billy
Newman says it's gone.
We're equally as suspicious that it's there. There's no reason why for it not to be there.
On option A, of course, the ideal thing if to turn it back into a greenfield site for future development would be to tear that building down as far as being able to work around it. It would be awfully difficult, would it not, to do this work and try and leave the building there?
I will share with you, Mayor, that when we did the power plant, one of the disadvantages we had when we went in there, and the standards by which a 1924 building was constructed versus what today are more than a world apart. And being inside that building as we started breaking out, those pieces that tied it together was a little nerve-wracking because we actually had hired, which I didn't know there was, forensic engineers who go in and look at buildings and actually try to tell you where you can break things out and not. And they do it with things as simple as ground-penetrating radar versus, in many cases, you don't have the plans even to know where these things are. We were going to have to pull some of the footers out of that building. So doing that with a building around you doesn't guarantee the building's going to be safe to use or to remain at the end because of the equipment necessary to break some of those things out to get access to it. In areas when we were at one point going to use the option B inside, we were going to have to drill cores through all the concrete distance and hope it all meshed together. Again, we were able to locate it all and actually excavate it out and backfill it and then concrete over top of it. Again, I don't want to make a recommendation on your facilities or your land.
It would certainly appear to me just, again, I'm not an engineer, some of my comrades here, but it seems to me it would be far more financially feasible for the future just to take the building down and you could rebuild it than we'll be trying to save it. Do you have any opinion on that?
I will tell you that if I have a clean site, it's a lot easier to get equipment in and take the material out. It's, again, in my former life, when I was doing things in more natural resource setting, it was a lot easier to take pieces of building down and excavate out fuel spills, things that were sitting outside in the Everglades, in the Kissimmee Basin, storage tanks out there. It was always easy to move all the infrastructure out of the way so you could excavate down and then return everything back as compacted and as appropriate.
I don't know what the opinion of the rest of the council is, but I certainly think we need to do whatever we can to turn it to a greenfield site for future development because it's just an ideal location anyway. And I certainly want to make sure we do everything that we eliminate any future contamination of that site. Mr. Sturgeon.
I think Deputy Mayor had hers first.
I asked.
Oh,
He
did
answered
you?
my.
All right, thank you.
He asked my question.
So we've been talking with OC for several months about this project, and there's a value proposition that we'd like to discuss. There's actually a cost to this, obviously, and OUC would be open to paying for the cost of this, and it's in excess almost of $4 million if we do one option and $2 million if we do the other, for an extension in their agreement with us. So one of the things we need to do is figure out how we're going to pay for it. The other thing is DEP has put us on the clock. They said, you have to do something. We want to see a plan. We want to see action. This has gone on too long. That's kind of terse, but they were very serious about their.
That was yesterday's conversation. When are you going to implement the cleanup and when do you think it'll be done? And the only thing we shared with them was that we were addressing the city council in a workshop format, that there would not be any decisions made, but we would have that conversation with the city and then get back with them as quick as possible.
Well, I think we need to move forward with whatever we do as soon as possible.
And so I'd ask the council if they would direct and delegate the mayor and I to negotiate with them to bring back a proposal to get this site cleaned up, based on what you decide on what option you want to take.
Councilmember Matheny?
Thank you. Well, I don't think Mr. Cooper wants to do anything with this power plant.
I think
Just
I
kidding.
started all this thing. What are you talking about?
Just kidding. So I know we had some conversations as a council about, potentially saving the building and, looking at other venues, but I did not realize that the contamination was so far under the building. I mean, that kind of changes the conversation. So for me, I was going to ask a couple questions, and you two gentlemen asked them, but, for me, I would be more comfortable, and obviously you could get a more clean and be more sure that you got the contamination with the option A. That's one of the questions I was going to ask is, are you proposing to demo the building as part of option A, which it sounds like that is potentially one of the solutions. Then the other question I was going to ask is, do we have a budget? And you're saying it's between $2 and $4 million, depending on which option.
No, we do not. We'd have to take it out of contingency, borrow the money. We don't have any other option, or have OUC.
No, I'm the cost. You just said they were willing
They
to
were willing
cover it,
to-
and it's between $2 and $4 million.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. I'm sorry, I
So
misunderstood
then,
you.
we got those answers. So for me, I would be more inclined with option A.
Councilmember Trace?
Thank you. Great presentation. On the costing, so is the entire remove and replace the $4 million, and the in situ injection is $2 million?
It's there's 2.6 and 2.9, somewhere in that range. And then that is to answer Councilman Matheny's question, that is with the presumption the building has been removed. We did not cost that. And that's what is in addition to that, because, again, we didn't want to make your decision.
Okay. So the entire remove and replace, in some of the backup documents, it showed 12,000 yards of
12,000
material
of
that
one
had come-
product and about 6,700 of another. Tons, 6,700 tons of another, I think, if I remember right.
Okay. Are we using the well at Water Plant 2 anymore? The one right next door?
It's for repump and fire protection.
Okay, so we're not actually pulling any water out of the
Correct,
ground.
unless there's an emergency. We would use it for fire protection.
Okay. If we clean up to, because there's different cleanup target levels, right? There's residential, there's commercial. I don't know if there's any other, but just based on the constituent, do we have a cost of cleaning up or getting to a level that would work for a commercial cleanup target level versus completely greenfield?
We have not stratified that type of approach yet. We can. It was more of we actually did the examination of what are the groundwater cleanup levels we could achieve of a commercial to see how close we were. And that was what the price was based on, a commercial. But if it needs to be cleaner, that's just another piece of research in there.
Okay. And then, are there state funds available for the cleanup?
There's around 270,000, I think it is, remaining. There was a 700,000 amount that was offered by the state. That's part of the discharge funding report under the Petroleum Contamination Program. A little over 300,000, 400,000 in that range was already expended in the cleanup. So what's remaining is that amount, not nearly enough to pay for the engineering, much less the cleanup.
Or even the testing afterwards? And then could we put a brownfield designation over the property and get some tax credits, or other developments have done brownfield designations and then they get tax credits for some of the cleanup?
I'll share with you an experience, and the answer is you can. In many cases, when I have dealt with the federal government, it has cost more than 100% more for the project working with them than it is just to clean it up yourself. And this is not that big of a project that it can't be done without the brownfield designation. But there are tax credits, there are options and programs. EPA has to recognize it, certify it, it has to be put on in their program and gone from there.
Okay, because I've dealt with some things where the government can do it more efficiently because they can kind of streamline the process, and then there's other times where the private sector could do it more efficiently because some of the hoops that you have to jump through are lessened, so I just didn't know.
I think the regulators at this point are as motivated to get it cleaned up as we are.
Okay. And then, yeah, I just want to make sure we're not, when we look at the property and the value of the property, sometimes, cleaning up for the sake of public safety is perfect, and I think we need to do it. It's just a matter of, I want to make sure that sometimes you spend more money to do something than it's worth in the end. So I don't know if the property's worth the $4 million if we spend that much to clean it up. I think we need to clean it up in general, but sometimes you spend more than something's worth in the final result. So just want to think through that.
Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you. The 2 or 3 pools of contaminant that you've seen, you haven't gotten off of the property to the north, especially on Connecticut Avenue towards 9th Street, 8th Street. I can tell you right now, I got somebody that would testify that underneath that street on Connecticut Avenue, there is contaminants, oil. They used to just drain it right there. So when he did put all that street in there 25 years ago, 30 years ago, their front end loader, there was oil right there. So I think probably that whole block to the north from 9th Street to 8th Street would probably need to be ground penetrate, check, whatever, and underneath that street, at least to 8th Street.
We actually have wells.
Have we done that?
Yeah, we have wells on 9th Street today, at monitoring wells that are there as well. There's a little bit further north than that. And most of those, I think there's one that shows some level of contamination. Most of those are actually undetectable. So there is a limit, and that was what they were trying to search for. To Connecticut on the northeast side, as you were describing, underneath the road, depending on the last time you did a road project out there, that's where the injection method or methodology might be useful. You could actually seize in situ and create the boundaries in that particular spot if that was a choice for the city.
So your cost of what you're saying is only for the 2 or 3 pools that you found around in the city's property, but that does not include going north on Connecticut or any homes. Let's say you may have to buy a home or two.
We again, from what we've seen so far in the monitoring wells, we don't detect petroleum on the other side of the road there. We actually have a couple wells out there. If I go to, for example, any one of these sites, if you look in the area up right here, you'll see a couple monitoring wells, and there's one over here also somewhere. You'll actually see it on your screens better than you will on this screen, I'm afraid. But there are some wells that set we kind of created a rectangle out of this to see what the extent was. And again, the piece that sits where there was all the above ground storage tanks here, that part has been cleaned. It's what's along this ridge right here and going underneath Missouri is where we think there's a significant amount of free product in there also.
Okay. And I'll just ask the question. What kind of problem are OUC into because some of the spillage was from OUC?
We agree we're your partner in this.
How much percentage are you?
I don't know I can't give you the total of the site, and there's, options that we can work out, together to get there so that we actually, we are your partner in this. We're as committed to getting this cleaned up as the city would be.
Well, I have a problem when you want to make a deal for a deal, and I don't like that. I'm sorry. I'm one of these 5 council members. I'm one of the Lone Ranger that says, this ain't right. If you made a mistake and you spilled oil there, you ought to 50-50 or whatever. Let's get some grants and let's get it and whatever we can do. But I don't see that ask for 5 more years or 10 years or 20 years OUC to us to hang on and stay with you. Maybe we're going to. Maybe that's far down the future to do. But it rubs me wrong to ask for, Mr. Surgeon, you asked through them, but it bothers me.
And in total disclosure at this point, we did clean up most of what spilled on the day tank spill that was under our watch. And there is in our agreement a delineation of where each one of us has separated our responsibilities. A lot of the things that are out there are things that have happened over a long period of time. Valves have failed, tanks have leaked. So it's, we're taking the position with the city, as I said, as a partner to come forward and say, there's a problem here. We know we have a portion of this as a responsibility, and let's look at all the options. That's just one suggestion. It doesn't have to be that. The city could go back and, tackle this on their own, and then come back and say, oh, you see, where's your piece of this? And we could have those discussions. That was only an offer of a direction.
That was my question, because I've heard over past years that OUC had fault also of spilling and having contaminates
we have
into the ground.
We turned ourselves in, and we actually began the cleanup project during the 1998 spill, as I said, when the main above-ground tank spilled in there. Beyond that, their plant wasn't operated very much when you get into the periods of times after that.
Well, it's not, yes.
And when the new transmission lines came in, as well as the substation upgrade, the plant was put into cold shutdown, and then it was certified as no longer operating. And that window of time is not a really long time. The period of time that it was operated, it was used as a voltage balance tool, so it wasn't even running full time. So we are fully aware we have a responsibility in this too, and that's why we stepped forward and actually did the studies and so forth and tried to pull all this together, and why we're taking the position working with the city right now on what are the solutions you would like to see.
Okay. Where am I at?
Councilmember Matheny.
Thank you. The substation that's to the west of the power plant, is that still active?
I think all the substations that are there are still active. There's still energy and all the conductors out there right now.
Okay. So you said that DEP is basically at the end of their patience with this project and the cleanup and that. Who does DEP hold responsible? Like, who is DEP coming after? Are they coming after the city? Are they coming after OUC? Are they coming after both? Like, who's their...
I'll let your council answer that one, but I'll tell you, you own the land. So.
Remember, the OUC does not own the utility. It is the St. Cloud's utility. OUC's agreement with us to manage the utility. So we are responsible for the assets, to a certain amount of these assets particularly, because this is all part of the old St. Cloud utility when it was operating. So.
Okay.
So I would suggest to you that they're going to come after us
The
first.
city. So thank you for acknowledging your part in this this problem. So, I'm thinking, I understand where Mr. Cooper's coming from, and I'm thinking that, if we give direction to the mayor and the city manager to move forward with negotiations, all those things would come into effect, a proportionate share and things like that, and probably some language like, if they got a whole bunch of grant funding, then that should reduce our contribution or whatever the contract is. I'm sure they'll take all that into consideration. But I wanted to kind of touch on the fact of something that Mr. Trace said about the value of the land versus the cleanup and not expend too much. I don't think we have an option. It's not like a business economic decision like, should I buy this car for $300,000 when it's only worth $50,000? I mean, we're in kind of a contamination cleanup situation, so I don't think that is a metric that we would use in this particular situation. So that was just my comments.
Mr. Sturgeon?
I'm sorry, Mayor.
Okay.
I left my...
Councilmember Trace?
And I figured you'd go down that route, since I already had my button. Well, so it's 2 acres of property really is what we're talking about. And if there's a $2 million cleanup or a $4 million cleanup that both remediate the issue, if one, it has to stay green as a park in perpetuity for $2 million, or we can fully dig it out for $4 million and the piece of property is worth, $500,000 afterwards, we're spending $2 million for $500,000. That's kind of where I was going with that. We do have a obligation to clean it up, and I don't disagree with that. I think we have a great partnership with OUC, and I like the fact that you guys are coming to the table and kind of helping us work through this issue. I kind of wanted Dave to, if you wanted to say anything first. I just kind of wanted to say, I think it'd be good for the mayor and the city manager to work through a simple term sheet for kind of all of us to look through, outlining either option A or B with the costing, with the timeline, what we need out of FDP or any of the other regulatory agencies, who's responsible for kind of moving the ball down the line, whether it's, you know, OUC if you guys are taking it and running, or if it's Bill and staff to go down that, and then just the scope of the cleanup. So just kind of outlining all that, put something together, bring it back to us, and let's take a vote and get this thing moving.
Councilmember Askew.
So I'm going to go there. You know, we're losing another historical building. It doesn't seem like we really focused on any of that part of it at all. And I know part of the building's historical, and then there was an add-on or what I call a scab on part of the building that's really a metal building. The other parts I'm looking at here is it just seems strange that nothing went over towards the food pantry at all. So those buildings over there are just untouched, or we just don't go near them? How does that work?
I think, to be fair, again, and transparent, I think we need to do more assessment in that. When we do these things at this level, when you're just trying to surround it and find out where it is, the details are the devil in this particular case, where you're going to need to get in there and start finding out exactly how deep, how much, and the means by which you can remove it. It's difficult, again, an older building, as I described, to get in there and start excavating around and under and not. There would never be a guarantee, I don't believe anyone could give you, that we could do that without causing serious damage to the facade and the infrastructure that's there. I think probably one of the, and again, you know, consider the source on this one. I have as much love for water and dirt as your two engineers do, and but in this particular case, in the building that we were doing, we actually could date reinforcement bar through there by the century, by almost the decade of which it was used. It was that many times it had changed, and in some cases, when we actually hit it with a jackhammer, it just shattered and fell apart. Other cases, it was, like I said, so still intact. Other pieces of the building were starting to crack as we did that, and that's the risk, because it's the design standards don't have any interlocking requirements that as they do today.
And you feel that nothing on the north side where the food pantry is on rear 9th Street in Missouri, none of that has been touched, so those buildings can stay intact?
I can't tell you that at this point. I don't have enough detail to get you there.
I think if we're doing this, we should be, you know, we should be taking a look at the whole site, not just a portion of that site.
That is exactly our point.
Can I chime in on that?
Sure.
Dave? So, sorry to interject, but I think I can help out Chip a little bit. Is, you know, I've done this a few times in my job. So initially what happens is you identify it, which that's where they are. They've been monitoring it. That's where they are, just to make sure that the groundwater isn't transporting it. And, you know, that's what they've been doing. But before you go further, you would do like what they call a phase 2. So they would literally go out and punch holes until they go, okay, there's the edge. Okay, there's the edge. Okay, you know, so there will be much, much more testing as it moves forward. And so then, you know, I'm sure this is just a graphical representation of a few cores, but they'll do a bunch, like a geotechnical firm will go out there and they'll just do hole after hole after hole and find the limit of it. So you will know definitively, did it go, you know, under the buildings, or, well, you won't know under, but you'll know right up to the edge of the building. Is it on the other side of the building? Is it, you know, so you'll know those things.
So understanding that you told us this information, we have to act. We don't have really a choice at this point, so we need to do something. Right. I'd still say it would be nice to be able to save part of the building or some portion of the building, or I don't know. But also we got to move forward on this, and you're telling me it would be very difficult to save that building and get rid of all the particulates that happen to be in there.
It's not going to be an easy task. I will share that with you, exactly the risk and so forth. I'm taking the conservative approach in my discussion with you all, just because having gone through it once, there's a couple times that the train went by and I saw dust falling off of walls, and I was kind of looking for the sunshine.
Councilmember Matheny.
Thank you. At one point, it was mentioned that the food pantry was doing a bunch of renovations. Did we stop them or ask them to hold?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Any other questions?
You could, sure.
Do you have the direction that you need at this point?
Yes, I just want to go back, and I think that was a good suggestion Mr. Trace made, to have a simple term sheet. And I just talked to Mr. Manzares. We could do a preliminary agreement, I guess. Is that the right word? and look at it like that, and then go to the phase 2 and really pinpoint what the issue really is. I think we have a global perspective now, but we need to drill down and then come back to the council with those options with prices attached to it, and then in a formal action.
Right. Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you. Who did who did all of the ground penetrating or whatever to find the pools?
There's been several,
what company?
There's been several companies, and some companies don't exist anymore, and that's part of what we had. They were either bought up by somebody else. The last report, the one that I based this presentation on, was done by Tetra Tech. And they have been someone we've relied on other ground contamination that we've had in our operations in other places. It is, and I want to emphasize what Councilman Matheny said, that the delicacy of this is as delicate as a backhoe digging holes. It's not very pinpoint until you're exactly right. We get in there and start identifying the actual boundaries of all this. And one of the problems we had was that like for an example, in 1993, when they found a problem, they brought in a consultant who did some work. And then over in another part of the site, someone found something else, and they brought in a consultant who did some work. Getting Tetra Tech to come in and pull all the reports down off of the DEP's website, as well as everything else we could find, was a way to kind of get everything into one document, which I believe is what Councilman Trace is referring to, where we actually had them say, these wells had gross product in it, these wells had free product, these had soluble contaminations in there that were bound up in the water and or soils.
Turned your light off?
Yeah, I think I did.
You have direction then?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you so very much. You did an excellent job, and we appreciate all that you've done, and we look forward to partnering with you on this project.
I appreciate all your time and your comments this evening, and we'll see if we can't get something done here.
Thank you.
I'll bring my toys home.
Don't smell that one. It's terrible.
Yeah.
No.
That one, yeah.
I couldn't imagine. Well, we're going to let our kids play on that side, even though all that stuff's floating around and it's solidified. Anyway. You guys need to take a break?
I could use a 5-minute.
Can we take a 5-minute break? I got to take a 5-minute break if I don't.
Yeah.
You're the boss.
We're going to take a 5-minute break. 5 minutes.
You have a piece of There you
Let's go, guys.
That's called proper use of the gavel.
5 minutes is 5 minutes. I'm a stick.
Left my hot mess back there.
Looks like you girls are eager to go.
We thought we'd help.
Brings us to item number 4, the discussion regarding special event grants.
Good evening. I'm Erin Jenks, Special Events Manager, and I am here. First, we both have a bit that they're going to be intertwined, so I'm going to do my presentation first on the special event fee waiver and sponsorships.
Okay.
And I'm Charlene Kuhn, Grants Administrator for the City of St. Cloud, and as you know, I do the Community Agency Grant Program and the sponsorships. So, again, Charlene will be discussing the community support portion of this graph. I'm going to be discussing the special event portion. And as you can see, in the fiscal year 2017-18, the city had a total of $117,519.50 of special event in-kind service fees that were waived. These in-kind services would have been for such things as equipment use, facility fees, road closures, police and fire service, custodial service, and media services with special events. We are seeing a steady and rapid increase in the number of events that are taking place on city property. For example, in 2015-16, we had 25 special events that went through our process. This year, we have already had 25 go through our process, with 18 more scheduled to occur, bringing us to a total of 43 just for this year. This increase could be because of several factors. Neighboring municipalities are restricting the number of special events they permit, and changes in their processes as well. And of course, the growing population in St. Cloud and Osceola County. So we know the city of St. Cloud is known for its community events, and we should continue to provide bigger, better events for our residents and visitors. We need to establish a mutually beneficial partnership between the city and the community, provide provisions for requests for city equipment and services, and create visibility for the city through collaborative partnerships that support our mission, vision, our strategic plan, and goals for the city. In order for us to do this, we need to reassess our procedure for events and the events that we support and what our return on investment is. We also need to create a consistency on the city event sponsorships from organization to organization. Many of the organizations that we currently support with waived fees or in-kind fees do not consider that amount, or they don't know what that amount is, so to consider it for an event sponsorship. We want to ensure that we are getting the proper recognition for our in-kind event sponsorship. We're looking to create visibility for the city through prominent acknowledgement and support and assistance in these public events through marketing material and at the event itself. We are suggesting 2 event categories for event sponsorship: special events and signature events, and I'll go into detail on those in a moment. We've also separated the city service in-kind fees into 2 categories as well: fees eligible for waiver or reduction through sponsorship, and those which are ineligible. We suggest road closures, equipment usage, solid waste collection, facility fees would be examples of services eligible for waiver or reduction. Police and fire services, media services, special event permit fees, electric meter fees are examples that would be ineligible for waiver or reduction. For an event to be considered a special event, it would need to be open to the public, have an expected attendance of 250 people or more, and provide a unique experience that would benefit the residents. Some examples of events that go on now that meet that criteria would be our Race Across America event, National Day of Prayer, the Halloween Fright K, and there's several more. Those are just some examples for you. The other category would be our signature events. These events would need to meet, of course, the special event requirements, as well as create revenue-generating opportunities for local businesses. These events should reoccur annually, have an expected attendance of 2,500 people or more, and benefit the community as a whole. Just, oh, no. Okay. That's just, it was the criteria. Some recommended signature events could be the Battle for Narcoossee, Spring Fling, Smoke and Brews, Boats and Barbecue, 4th of July celebration, the downtown trick or treat, the Veterans Day Parade, annual Christmas parade, and annual craft fair. These are ones that already meet that criteria that we're talking about for signature events. So moving forward, in addition to the special event policy, we are creating a special event in-kind services fee schedule. This fee resolution would be on a future city council agenda for approval. We would also hold public meetings with the event organizers to inform and familiarize them with the new policy. And with direction from city council, we would set an annual budget for the special event in-kind services. These changes would be something that would take effect for any events taking place after October 1st, 2019. So before I let Charlene take over, is there any questions or comments?
Councilmember Matheny?
Thanks. I have a comment. On your slide, it was like 1 or 2 in, the one where you had the total of like $470,000 and, you know, with this policy revision, do you have an idea of what that number would be?
The recommendation?
Yeah, because, I mean, there was some bullet point items of things that should not be free, like police, fire, the IT services, things like that. But how much of that $470,000 are those items? I'm just curious. I mean, would you expect that number, if that policy is in place now, that number would be cut in half, that number would be
If
a
we
third?
removed the police services and everything from that number, you're looking at about $50,200 for 34 events in 2017-18, which on average is about $1,500 an event. So moving forward for the increase of events, taking that average, it's about $64,000. Speaking with Steve Lasky at City of Kissimmee, they have a very similar policy in place, and they budget between $60,000 and $70,000.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry to kind of hijack the centerpiece of this, but, you know, I like the idea of like actual costs to the city not being waived, you know, like the police, fire, that, I mean, I like that idea. But the other thing, I was just doing a quick little calculation based off of our budget, and, you know, $470,000 is 0.3% of our budget. So that's another thing to keep it. It's a lot of money, but it also, you know, there also is the community benefit and things to that, so.
Yeah, part of the Economic Development Summit was brought up several times, how the city of St. Cloud is known for its events. We want to continue to
Right.
have that.
So I mean, that is like 0.3% of the budget. I mean, it's a very small component of the budget.
Councilman Askew.
Thank you. Very good. I like the idea of all of this. I like the idea when people come up in a council meeting and they start asking for money, we can just stop and say, hey, there's a process. You need to go speak with Aaron. I think Lynette's brought that up many times. And what is so we've been waiving 43 events, the fees for those? So it used to be like $250 or $300, if I remember correctly.
The permit fee itself is $250, but when you add into all of the other extras that we provide to different events.
Oh, sure.
Generator use, bleachers, that takes city time and service hours to provide.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see Halloween on there. Is Halloween on there as well?
It was on
Okay.
I didn't see New Year's Eve.
Is New Year's Eve on there as well? Or? That's your guys'
That's
event.
a city.
Oh, that's a
Right.
city event, okay.
Right.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
does
it's-
not include city events.
Yeah, it's when they come up here and they're batting their eyelashes and everybody wants to get things. But, you know, we used to have to come in front of council and ask for a fee waiver for a long time. And normally you would end up getting it, especially if you're not making any money off it. So I like what you're doing. It's, you know, if we can make this happen. And again, I'm with Lynette. It's just a small portion, but also that is money of our citizens that we're spending, so.
And again, sponsorship, when I go out to look at organizations to help us with our events, sponsorship is a form of advertising. And we're not saying we don't want to be a part of your event, we want to get the recognition
Yeah,
as a
absolutely.
big sponsor for these events.
You guys are huge sponsors for the chamber, and it seems like the name's plastered everywhere in the chamber building, so. Yeah, if you can keep doing that, and then I guess part of it would be being the events person, you could actually, I'm not gonna say profit off it, but you could say, well, if we do this event and you give us this in return, or we get free marketing or
Right,
something
and
like that.
I've built, since I've been in this position, I've built good relationships with the chamber and the Rotary and Main Street, so that we do have, you know, a back and forth and working together as a team to put on these events, and that's the path we want to keep going.
Yeah, it was just one of them, there was a boat race or something, and they wanted a fee waiver, and then I went down there, and I could see city staff helping this thing and all, and I'm like, wait a minute, they're profiting off this. So it just seemed a little strange for something like that. 4th of July, those things are great for our citizens. Some people are coming into our town using our lake, and they're profiting off it. I know where you're going, so excellent.
No more
Excellent.
questions?
You ready?
I'm ready. Okay, so I've got the lion's share of the dollars here, of the $470,000. It's about $350,000 is what is going out in community support over and above the fees waived. This is cash out, that we are giving dollars to events, agreements, donations, all kinds of different paths that people are getting money and going to different departments and getting funds for their whatever purpose. Our policies, we worked together and we developed them together, and so they're essentially the same, but mine are, they don't have to be on city property. It doesn't have to be public and a free event. There's no minimum number of attendees, and there's no educational component, which I think you still have that in yours. 150,000, as you know, is for the grant program, and out of that 150,000 this year was 15,000 for event sponsorships. So the remaining is agreements like with the Chamber and Main Street. We do the Rotary Spring Fling. We do donations to Council on Aging. And every department, or not every, I should say, some departments have a budgeted line item for those events. So we tried our very best. It took a long time to capture all of those costs and bring those. And what we would like to do is put them in one account, which is an 8200 account, and it's called Community and Governmental Support. Dawn was here. I don't know if I said that right. Anyway, in that event, which I meant to touch on this first, so instead of being the community agency grant program, I want to just change it to community support. So we're capturing everything. So moving forward, what we're looking at is that any request for the support, except for those agreements that are already in place, would only request for 20% of the fiscal budget, whatever amount you decide to set. These agencies would have to provide, again, sponsor or promote the city in a way that, benefits us, and it indicates that, yes, we are sponsoring this event rather than just giving money, because oftentimes we get no recognition, unfortunately. And then on top of this, as well as Aaron's events, they would all have to report to me after 30 days after the event and say, what did you do with these dollars?
Excellent.
Again, the community support program is what we're asking is for Aaron's events, all these other little dollars that are going out through different avenues to be funneled through the grants division. And they would complete an application, except again, for those agreements that are already set in place. Like I said, the Chamber, I think we have one with Osceola Reeds. Another one, though, we want to capture is like the Rotary. That was, Veronica called me last week, and we were giving them $8,000, and that was never captured, so they're not going through the program. So we want to increase our community support and to include all of those dollars and remove those from the individual department accounts. We want to allocate a set amount for fee reductions, waivers, like Aaron had mentioned, and then set amount for those reoccurring events. And those are the ones that would not have to apply. And then what we would like to do is allocate to each council member a set amount annually. That, for either your pet projects or somebody comes to you and says, hey, can you support this event? Osceola County does do that. Unfortunately, we don't have their budget. Each commissioner does get $50,000 a year. And that's determined annually. Right. But, maybe set a line item for you guys to say, okay, I've got $5,000 for individuals to come and say, hey, can you support this event? However, they would still have to complete the application process, so we're still capturing all those revenues, and we know where those dollars are going. And they're providing, what is mentioned in the application and giving us the acknowledgement through marketing or event seats or a table at the event. Let's see. So there's a couple things we need to discuss or maybe consider is just make sure that the program intent, we're reaching what you as the city council, what you want out of this program as far as community support. And then we also need to determine if they do receive some kind of funds from us and they apply, can they apply more than once? Can they get an event sponsorship and can they get a grant, and then can they get fees waived from Aaron? Because they're going through several different avenues, and there's also people that are going to the police department too. So, and then if they do, we need to set those limits as well. And I already discussed setting the limit for city council. And then the other option, what I would suggest, which I've also added to the policy, in addition to what I wanted to mention, was that we added some things that we are ineligible activities, and we added the non-discrimination policy, because that's important when it comes to federal and state grants. So I added that component. We also added that we wanted to meet the city's vision and mission and the strategic goals. So, but anyway, during this process, that we, one of the big components is we recommend that the applicants cannot contact council and bat their eyelashes, as you mentioned earlier, and beg for your approval. So basically, we want direction at this time to set those funds, the individual allocations for the council members, the community support, the special events, and, you know, we can list those out individually. You can leave it up to staff to delineate where those dollars go if you're going to set a pot of money.
Well, first of all, I appreciate all the work you guys. I don't think most people have a clue how busy you guys are. I mean, every time I turn around, you guys are working, helping to organize and help and sponsor some event, either with you or with Parks and Recreation. I mean, you guys are just incredibly busy, and I just thank you for all that you do. I do think there's incredible wisdom here, trying to channel everything through a common source of management, rather than all the different pots that things go to. I personally like the idea of being able to have a little budget to do some things. I just think we need to think that one through, though, carefully, because you don't want people going to different 2 or 3 different council members for the same thing and then coming to you guys. And so that would have to be thought through real carefully.
The point of the application process is if you give them $1,000, they have to complete an application. So I'm going to know, oh, they've already completed one, so, you know, Ms. Matheny can't then sponsor for another $1,000.
I'm also curious on the reports that, you know, they're supposed to submit. Do all of the people who have who get money, do they all submit follow-up reports?
Only if they go through the community agency grant program, or which you guys do annually, or the event sponsorship application. Only if they complete an application, basically. But
so
those
if they
line
don't,
item
then they're
items.
pulled for next year, right?
I'm sorry?
Correct.
If they don't submit a follow-up report, do you pull them, do you not?
Yes,
Or
they're not
should?
eligible to apply.
Okay. Is it possible that we have too many events?
Smile.
I know I'm asked
She's
to
events, I'll let her answer that question.
I know I'm asked to come to quite a few events.
That's another direction of trying to do bigger, better events and looking where we can take, you know, where we have a monthly calendar where there's every Saturday, there's something going on. Well, how can we bring more of this together so it's only, you know, utilizing one Saturday a month? And, you know, that's another direction where we want to try and bring bigger, better events together.
You know, and I personally like the idea of certain signature events, because when you think of certain cities surrounding us here, there are certain events that city always does. It's and it's not just diluted by a bunch of other events. It's such a big event. It's done annually. It's done right with class and excellence, and I just think there's something about big signature events that really lift the profile of the city, and I'm just rambling on what I like anyway. But I don't know, how do you evaluate having too many events? I mean, gosh, there's so much going on. Sometimes I think that is a problem. You're trying to promote events. You got events on top of events.
And her hair will fall out.
We put two or three events together. I mean, start the process of saying, let's put 3 or 4 together.
Yeah, a good example, the Main Street Smoke and Brews and Boats. It used to be P1 powerboat races one weekend, Smoke and Blues the following weekend. Those have come together. So, and that's what we want to continue to do.
Excellent. I had the same thought here. Thank you. Councilmember Matheny.
Thank you. So I want to echo the mayor's sentiments. I know that the grants are, like, I don't know how you guys herd the cats and come together with the program that you do with all of us, giving you, like, multiple direction and things. That's very impressive. One of the questions I have is, like, will all this fall to, like, like Charlene's discretion? Like if somebody makes an application, is it Charlene who has to like yes or no?
No, basically.
Is it a committee?
What it amounts to, right, the way it works right now. And the community agency grants would still stay with you guys, and you would do that. And that would be open annually, the ones that come throughout the course of the year. And that's kind of why we did the event sponsorships for those who did not meet the window of opportunity, so they could come. And then the city manager had contacted you guys and said, you know, can I approve these after he's reached out to you individually? And that's kind of the way we're moving forward, but that's another policy question, is if they come to us one time for an event sponsorship and they know they want to do this next year, then they need to go and apply through the grant program.
Well, I'm just wondering, I guess my question was more like, is this a lot of pressure on like one person being the, you know,
The city manager.
Is it like a one-person decision, or is it like it has to go?
They have to meet the criteria, and there would be a
Right.
checklist, and then those events that don't go into the grant program would be presented to the city manager to make that decision,
Okay.
which he's doing now anyway, I know, with the fee waivers and.
Yeah, and we had suggested an in-house committee with myself, Charlene, and possibly David Rodriguez from the Economic Development, since he would have a hand in, you know, what the city puts out there. And then us making that recommendation again for Bill.
What about recommendation of 2 or 3 times cutoff dates? So that if they want to do X, Y, and Z, you've got a certain time, every 3 months, every 4 months, that's it, that's it, that's it. And that money we'll dedicate it to a certain amount of funds.
Which is a great idea. That is very labor intensive. And when it comes to the grants, it's just Jamie and I. And I mean, that process literally lasts 9 out of the 12 months just for one window of opportunity. And if we did that 3 times a year, that's all we would do.
And believe me, it's real political sometimes.
Oh, there's no, you think?
You think?
That's why I didn't want it to be like
That's why I was
Charlene.
No, we're not,
you know,
I'm not making that decision. Aaron's
like
not
the
making that
pressure on
decision.
her. Yeah, okay.
I think Councilmember Trace would like to jump in here.
Hey, you guys do great events, and I love all the events we have, and I hear it from all over Central Florida that St. Cloud has really great events. I really love the way the grant program works. That was fantastic. It was one of my first meetings, and it was just outlined. You had the nice spreadsheet and all the data and facts behind it all. It was great. So this kind of looks like you guys are getting in that same realm for other aspects, which is fantastic. And I don't think anyone else mentioned this part, the 8,200 account. I really think it's good for transparency of it's all in one spot. We see where all the money's going instead of it just being in a bunch of, not hiding spots, but a bunch of little buckets.
Right.
It's all together, and we kind of can focus on it and make sure that we're tracking year over year who's getting to pull from the cookie jar. So yeah, I think it's great what you guys have worked up.
Right, and that 8,200 account, just, Don and I have had a few conversations about this. That is just the cash only, cash in and cash out. Now, we would have to do a spreadsheet or something for the fees, waived service, because those are in kind. That's not actually cash going out.
Okay.
So, but Don would be able to answer the question as to how the best way to handle that.
So the 117,000 wouldn't be tracked the same way as
Right.
the 350,000?
Not in the AS 400, not
Yeah,
that way.
we would still continue to track it, and especially because we want these organizations to know at what level we're supporting their events so that we can get that return.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councilmember Askew.
Love the idea. I'm confused when Mr. Cooper was saying something about people can come to you, not to Charlene, but to Aaron and ask for an event. It has to be 3 months out. There's a whole guideline of coming for events.
Yeah, for our resolution, there is a 40, you have to be at least 45 days prior to the
Right.
event, or 90,
Okay. I thought that got waived
for the
or something.
application process.
Okay.
That was where I was trying to come from, okay.
Yeah.
Did I hear you correctly that you said that there are departments that have their own fund and sponsor events? How complicated is changing all that?
Well, really, I mean, it's basically council and city manager, and I think there was some funds in the assistant city manager's account this year. those are the primary 8,200, and the police department, I know they give dollars. That's a whole different animal, so I don't know how we could do that. And honestly, I don't know about the fire department if they.
I think we ought to take all the fire department's money. Let's think, Joe. Oh, that'd certainly be a thing you'll have to work on, I assume. Any
And that
other,
would be in the budget.
Council member Askew?
It just seems strange, you're coming up here wanting to take on a big pile of work, and I appreciate that, both of you. That's a big ask, so.
We're just trying to be good stewards of
Right.
city taxpayer dollars.
Good.
Honestly, I still already track all that. That's how I was able to provide those numbers to you. I
Right.
went back, to 2015, 16 and started calculating all that to get to where we are now.
I appreciate it.
Mr. Sturgeon?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor, Council. It's a very tedious process for me, and sometimes I felt very awkward making that decision. And I try to do my due diligence. I look at it as a nonprofit. So I never had a checklist. So policy direction was given probably before I was city manager, and it's a difficult process. And if I tell somebody no, they still could come in front of council. I think we wanted to stop the people coming up every meeting, but I was given policy direction, and we didn't do the staff work that says, here's the checklist that the city manager goes through. And if they still say no, they're still going to come up here, and I won't encourage that, but they still could come up and say, hey, I didn't think that's right, that Mr. Sturgeon denied my application.
Mr. Manzares, people can come before the council and say anything they want to say, but have you had any experience on working with other cities where they have a policy where they can't come and request money from the council? I mean, how do you?
Well, it's very difficult when you're doing, in situations like this, to keep someone from standing at a podium and asking for it. In fact, you don't really have an ability to do that. The way most entities do it is the way I think we're looking at doing it here more formally, is have an established policy. The policy would be, imagine, drafted and then presented to you as a city council. You would approve it. That gives staff the ability to say, nope, this is the policy. This is what was adopted. This is what we have to follow. So it's sort of, although it may seem like a big task for them, they'll still have their boxes that they have to check before they can say yes. And if all those boxes aren't checked, then they get to say no. But that doesn't mean, again, that they won't show up here at the podium and ask you for some sort of relief from a box they may not have been able to check. And you can't stop that.
Well, I wasn't insinuating stopping that. I don't know how you could, but that means we'd have to pass rules for ourselves that we're willing to abide by.
Well, yes, I think that's part of it. The council would follow the same policy that you adopted, and so that, and essentially, they would have to talk to the applicant and say, you didn't meet what you needed to meet this time, and go the next route.
Because I don't think we've turned down anything that's ever come before the council. But the problem is we don't know what the budget is. We don't know all the ins and outs of the event and all the stuff they need. I just think it's wise to what you guys are trying to help us do. Will help us make our job easier. Probably make your job worse, but I like what I'm hearing.
And we'll come back, Mayor, with a policy that you guys can codify in the future, near future.
Do we have any other questions or input from council? Have at it, gals.
Thank
You guys
you.
are doing an awesome job. Appreciate all your work. You guys are incredible. Councilmember Matheny, did I miss you?
No, but before you adjourn, I had two things I wanted to bring up, but I just wanted to say that before you hit the gavel. Continue.
All right. What do I have? I don't have anything else.
Messed him up.
Can I go?
Yes, go for it.
Awesome. So I talked to the city manager this week. I got a phone call about chickens. Let's talk about chickens.
Fried, grilled.
So in what'd you say, Keith?
Fried, grilled.
Yes.
So the city council, prior to me getting on city council, and Dave was here, passed an ordinance to allow the backyard chickens.
Sure fall.
So the No, from my understanding, it's a very successful program. Everybody's very happy with it and all that. What the phone calls that I got is it has expired. The backyard chicken program has expired, and so there's people that are wanting to get chickens, but they call the city, and the city's like, "Hey, it's expired." Called Bill. We did a little research, and they are working on a permanent, because that was like a pilot program. So they are working on a permanent ordinance, but it's not going to come for a month or two. So I asked Bill, and he checked with Dan. I said, could you administratively just extend the pilot program so that people can continue the program? Because I know there's people interested in calling. He's not able to administratively do that. So I'm wondering if the council would support bringing walking it onto the agenda for next Thursday to extend the pilot program so that we don't fall into a gap.
If they're still going to the class, they still take the class?
All of the rules remain. I'm just saying extend the pilot program. So all the terms and conditions that were approved in 2016, which is like the class and there's a permit fee and all that stuff. Could we just walk that onto the agenda for Thursday so
Mr.
that
Renderis?
Well, 2 first, so the ordinance from
2016.
2016, I actually looked at it later this afternoon, it's 2016-36, I think, has a sunset provision in it, and the sunset provision was for September 8th of 2018, so the ordinance sunset. It has another provision in it that allows the council to extend that sunset provision by a simple resolution. So it really would take a one-page resolution, which if you keep talking for a little while, I can probably draft it right now. But everybody wants to go home, I get that. So we certainly can do that if that's the pleasure of the council. Unfortunately, due to a lot of stuff going on this past week, as you probably realized, we're still working on the agenda. So it's probably a likelihood we could, I'm waiting for Linda to pick up something and throw it at me. But it's likely we wouldn't have to walk it on. We probably could get it.
I'm holding it right now.
We could get it on because.
Oh, okay. But I know that there's been some, discomfort with walk-on kind of items, so I just wanted to see
And it would be
council.
simply, but what we would ask, at least since we're talking about it, I don't know if Andre or his staff has any idea about how far away they are with the permanent ordinance.
They told me May when I talked to them.
Well, May is like 2 weeks.
We talked to.
That's a look that,
We talked to Jacob.
That's why I just said, can we just extend it so that they are not scrambling? I'm going to have to use chicken metaphors. You're not scrambling to try to.
I mean, we've got that many people that are wanting to do it.
There is, yes, and I'm sorry, there was like 50 permits, right, initially when I saw, because I wasn't on council then, I thought there was it was capped at 50. Is that?
I think so.
So do we have availability in the permitting process to allow?
Oh, yes. We never exceeded the
Okay.
cap.
Because I know Mr. Mills had told me that you guys have been keeping a list of everybody that's been calling and then wanting it, but have been told right now it's not available, but it will come back.
Right. So we have the ordinance already, 2016-36, which laid out the entire process. So we would not need to change that. It's simply extending the date because, as I said, it did sunset in September. And so as long as we can extend the date to either make it permanent or to continue another pilot, that needs to be made.
And I would just suggest to the council that you probably should do that, and I apologize for this, I probably should have realized this, but arguably, if there are permits out there where people have chickens, they're in violation of the code right now.
Right.
Because that ordinance sunset, so that ordinance is no longer on the books. So currently, as we sit here today, regardless about whether you have a permit or not, because the permit isn't valid anymore because of the sunsetting of the ordinance, chickens are prohibited in the city of St. Cloud. So we really have sort of arguably, and if we haven't done any, I'm assuming we haven't done any enforcement on that.
They're required to renew annually.
Right,
and
but because the ordinance, the enabling legislation is gone, arguably the permit is now gone, if you understand what I mean. So you really, in deference to those people who have, I'm not even talking about people who want to get new ones, in deference to those people that have these permits and went through this step, we probably should get that thing extended fairly quickly so that we don't have to deal with that.
Councilmember Trace, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine extending it. Do we know if it was, I haven't heard anything positive or negative about it. Do we know if it was successful and really brought about the community aspects we're looking for with it?
So we didn't have an overwhelming amount of permits. However, the ones that we did have, they were successful. We didn't have any violations. We didn't have any neighbors complaining. And that would have been one of the presentations that we would have made to you to give you sort of a report of what happened. And essentially, nothing happened that was negative or created any concern for the city.
Perfect, yeah, I'm fine bringing it on.
Councilman Rescue?
So I have my chicken completion form. I went and took the tests and all that stuff. And the class is actually pretty unique, and I don't know what the numbers are, but not everybody that takes the class gets a chicken. I think once they realize all the work that's involved with it, they're like, yeah, I'm not doing this. So, yeah, I'm all for, let's get that done.
Councilmember Matheny?
Thank you. So you have direction?
I do. I'm
Okay,
good.
my second issue. This just came up this week where I was contacted about a piece of property that somebody has under contract, and, you know, there was issues with that. But while I was looking at the piece of property, I thought, well, dang, that would have been a good piece of property for us, you know? So I talked to Bill, and I said, is anybody watching real estate in the city of St. Cloud to see what's coming up for sale? So we have all these master plans. We have park master plans where they're envisioning parks is, you know, and every time I drive through the grid, I just see every open piece of land that was of decent size, there's houses going on it. So, you know, is there somebody that's kind of watching the real estate to see what's coming up? How could we look at it? Should the city make an offer? You know, things like that. And he told me nobody's watching that. So I just kind of wanted to see what council was thinking about that, like maybe assigning a staff person to monitor the real estate.
Right.
I mean, it's very easy online, but it would need to be somebody that knows, you know, kind of the vision of what we're trying to do in all of the master plan procedures. I just think we're kind of missing an opportunity. It's kind of like when we bought the park on Virginia, and Mr. Askew made the point of, yeah, you have a master plan, but you don't own any of that property. You know, you might not ever be able to buy that property, but if we're not monitoring it to see what's coming up for sale, you know, it's just going to have houses on it.
Councilman Raskin?
And to bring up your point, there's an entire block for sale. The Wrights excavating property is for sale, that entire block, and I believe it's under $1 million, and that's a huge, and it's in an opportunity zone. So those are some areas.
Yeah.
Just one, for example.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe David Rodriguez needs to watch it or something, but, you know, it's just like we're missing this piece. I was just like, so, you know, bummed. I was like, well, maybe their deal will fall through and we can, you know, look at an opportunity, but
Where was that?
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
Can't kill him later.
Well, if we're not voting on it, right?
It's not coming back before you.
So, do we have
I just would
conclusion
like,
here?
I mean, I just want to see what you guys think about, should we, you know, direct the city manager to have a staff person, you know, be monitoring real estate in the city of St. Cloud?
Do you
And
have
maybe-
someone in mind that?
And maybe in the JPA, maybe monitor it in the JPA and.
Right.
Not off the top of my head, but I'd like to sit down with staff and discuss it. And, you know, I don't think it'd be that difficult to do.
I mean, you just get on an email blast and you get it every day and you kind of look at it.
So will you pursue that and
I will, and I'll come back and
come up with some
report
kind of
out.
action on that?
It's a really good point. I mean, there's 91 acres, that's $1.2 million, but it's down south, but it's in our JPA, but
Yeah.
that could be a future park for Stephanie's group or something like that.
By the dirt.
And it's.
Yeah, and it's dirt.
Well, and two, like, you know, if you were to find something, you know, what is the authorization of the city to make an offer? Or, you know, I mean, if we have to wait for council meetings, it might be snapped up before he has a chance to come back around and talk to us. So just a thought.
Are
That's
you
it. I
through?
am done.
Do we have any other input from council?
No.
Would anyone in the public like to make a comment? If not, we're done.
That's good.
One more thing, but I didn't wanna-
Sure.